an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Well, welcome to another exciting series of episodes that we are doing on the personal growth and networking. And our speaker today, Pyle, he's a financial planner. He's not only a financial planner, but he's also guiding a lot of salespeople to become better in their job, so that they can have more money in their accounts. And he's also guiding a lot of people and businesses towards attaining financial freedom in the next 17 years. And I think this can be one of the great things to understand. How can one attain financial freedom in this kind of an environment when there's a lot of uncertainty? People are losing their jobs. Some of them are getting laid off instantly. And if you don't have a side income, if you don't have something on the side coming in, you might be in a position, in a dangerous position, considering that the interest rates are rising around the world, considering that there is a high risk of recession in the near future, which many financial analysts have already told. And these kind of situations, Michael, I think you'll understand that it's a periodic cycle. It comes after every few years, and it will come after 15 years again or 20 years again. So how can we all be better prepared for these kind of situations? So we're going to discuss all of that from Michael. But before that, Michael, why not you share a short brief about yourself on the different stuff that you are doing, maybe in around 2-3 minutes, and then we can talk more about financial freedom.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me to chat. I think obviously I'm biased, but I think this is a very important topic. And I spent a little over a decade in the sales industry, mostly in software sales, selling to hospitals and healthcare systems. And I worked with a lot of salespeople over the years, and a lot of great people work in sales. And I think sales gets a bad rap, but I think there's a lot of really good, hardworking individuals. What I saw though is, in a lot of cases, someone's income in sales, half of it's made up of salary and half of it's commission. So a lot of people in the industry will call it, variable compensation. It's tough because salespeople, while they can make a lot of money, they can spend it just as quickly. So I saw a need that, kind of a niche market when I was building out my own financial planning firm, going, how can I serve my clients best? And I thought the best way was to open it up to sales professionals solely. I do work with other folks, but just coming from the sales background that I do, I think it makes more sense from a psychological and emotional perspective that I can understand what it's like carrying a quota, or having a huge commission check hit your bank account, or getting put on a PIP, performance improvement plan, where you're worried that, am I going to have a job next month if I don't hit quota? So there's a lot of things that go into building out a financial plan for somebody. At the end of the day, though, those are just numbers on a spreadsheet, right? Really, where I want to impact someone's life is really through the emotional journey with their money, because that, to me, is a bigger impact that I can make than any spreadsheet that I put together, no matter how great it is. It doesn't matter unless somebody really implements it and understands, what are their money triggers and what gets them to that better place where they kind of future state where they want to be. So.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful. So, coming back to today's topic, how do you think people can attain financial freedom in these tough times, and why in specific you have chosen 17 years, not less, not more?
Yeah, the 17 years, it goes off of actually one of the first kind of money blogs that I used to read, called Mr. Money Mustache. And the gentleman that writes that blog, kind of a funny name, but he writes an article about how simple it is, if you just look at the math, how simple it is to retire a lot earlier. So like in the US, for example, most people, if you ask them, hey, what's when are you going to retire? They'll say 65, right? It's just the normal response. Everyone kind of knows that's that's when folks are supposed to retire. So that's when they do. And they kind of shut their brains off to think for themselves of, well, is there a way to retire earlier?
Only if you're living till 65. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, that article, it kind of goes through and it says, hey, if your savings rate, to retire by 65, you've got to save, 10 to 15% of your income. And the author of the article just writes, he kind of just goes, if you save 20%, you can retire by 60. If you retire 30%, you can retire by 50, 55, and so on. And so basically where I landed was with salespeople getting half of their, total compensation as salary and half as commission. If you can learn to live off of your salary alone and save 100% of your commissions, basically you're going to be able to retire in 17 years because of the lack of expenses that you've built up. Most salespeople, they spend every dollar that they make. So if they make a ton, that means they're spending a ton. So if you can make a ton and spend half of that, then great. That means that you obviously have cut down decades of your working career if you want to. Now the 17 years is a little bit gimmicky, I'll be honest. Really what I think I want people to focus on is, okay, how can I create space from my paycheck, from one paycheck to the next, to where, maybe I want to do something different, right? I was in sales for a long, long time, but wasn't passionate about sales for a long, long time either. And speaking with salespeople, every other day, it's like a lot of people have other interests that aren't selling software to enterprise systems, right? It's maybe they're in a band, maybe they write poetry, maybe it's it's just something that uses kind of their creativity, and it's not necessarily sales related, but it lights them up, right? It gives them joy. And to me, the older I've gotten, I'm 36, I'm not too terribly old right now, but the older I've gotten, the more I kind of go, what we get one life. So how do I maximize this life that I get, the time that I get here on earth? Because it really isn't that much. So yes, I would love to see people retire early and then spend, the time doing what they love. But what I really want to do when I work with somebody is to get them to just think a little bit about, how do I create that little bit of space? Maybe it's I save enough to cut the corporate cord for a year or two and take a year or two off, and maybe try to build my business from there. Maybe it's taking a 3-month sabbatical and taking my family, on a summer vacation, RVing through, the United States. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of slice and dice how to save and kind of live life to the fullest. If they come to me and say, hey, I just want to be done and out of the rat race as soon as possible. Yeah, we can certainly get there. But I think the bigger question is why. Why do you want to? And that's what I try to dig in with every client of mine.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that, people would love to know is what can be the steps that they can take to attain financial freedom. So, if somebody is listening to this episode right now, they might be just thinking in their mind, all right, Michael is talking these big things of retiring early, but I'm working in a sales job, or I'm working in a financial job, or I'm working as an investment analyst. How can I make sure from today onwards so that I take the right steps so that I attain financial freedom in the next 17 years?
I think step one is kind of what I touched on a moment ago, which is kind of find your why, right? Like, if there's not a reason to do something, no matter how much you want to do it, you're not going to, right? Like, I might want to lose 10 pounds, but if I don't have a good reason to lose it, I might be motivated for a couple days, maybe even a couple of weeks. It's kind of that phenomenon where it's like, if you go into a gym at, January 1st of the year, it's packed, right? But by the time February 1st rolls around, hardly anyone's in it. And it's a lot of people, they need to find a bigger reason, of how to continue on the path that they want to. So finding your why would kind of be the biggest, kind of the emotional side of it. Tactically speaking, the biggest thing, and it's a drag because the B word, no one wants to talk about it, but budget. And you really have to I don't even want to say you have to write down everything that you think you're going to spend. Take a look at the last 2 to 3 months worth of credit card and bank statements. That'll give you a real good way into, hey, what do I spend my money on? And it's phenomenal when you ask, when I ask somebody what they spend and I ask them just to ballpark it, the amount of money that someone says that they spend versus what they actually spend is usually really, really far off. So I think that's kind of the first step, is getting clients and the folks that I work with to understand that just how much money it takes for them to live on a day-to-day basis, because it's a lot more than I think people understand. And then once they've got a good grasp on that, then it's okay. Now we have to extrapolate, what am I spending today versus what will I be spending in the future? And that's a little bit more of a complicated thing, right? Most people, they're living in the here and now. They're just trying to survive, right? I've got 3 young kiddos with the 4th on the way actually here in the next week or so. So I totally get getting lost in the day-to-day and not thinking, but I do encourage folks to, when they're thinking about, the bigger picture, to really take some time and think. I think people get so busy in their day-to-day that they just they either don't think they have time or they don't have the energy to think about it. And at the end of the day, if they don't spend that time and that energy on thinking about their future, I can't help them. Again, it doesn't matter. I could be the smartest person in the world and give them the best financial plan possible. They've got to want to do it, right? So really, you've got to get the mindset that I want to change, and it goes back. It's funny because it goes back into my sales career, where people change typically for 2 reasons, and it's either for pain or for gain. So for gain, it's, if somebody that's maybe they're just hyper focused on growth, they want to succeed, they're looking to increase their income, then that's obviously the gain side. The pain is probably more impactful, and that's, maybe they had a huge IRS tax bill come, maybe they missed payments on their credit card, maybe their home is underwater. There's a bunch of different things that trigger somebody to go, I need help. Somebody that's thinking that they're somewhat healthy, they don't get help until they have that heart attack, right? And then when they walk into the hospital and they talk to the doctors, at that moment, that's when they decide to maybe make a change in their lifestyle. Even if they knew that maybe eating all that junk food or not working out over the years was kind of bad for them, but they didn't really think about changing until that kind of that trigger moment. And that's the same thing, I think, with people's finances and what I do on social media today is really just to build the awareness that folks like me are out there to help, because I think I don't know about you, but I didn't get taught very much in personal finance growing up. You hear some things here and there. Most of it's from your uncle or your friend or your coworker at the water cooler. So having somebody like myself and our financial planner who kind of understands taxes, insurance, investments, and kind of wraps everything in your life up and kind of ties it with a nice little bow. If we can kind of create that nice little package for you and you're wanting to do it, the combination of those 2 things it can be incredible for your finances.
And just to touch on that point as well, Michael, I think that's a wonderful point that you've talked about, that when we are growing up, we are never taught about personal finances, and same is the case with me as well. Do you think that there is, this is the right time for us now to think about revolutionizing the education system around the world with changing times? With changing times, everything changes. It's also for us to kind of rethink and think together on how we want to educate our children, or how we want to educate the future generation. Are we going to do the same shit that we have been doing for the last 30, 40, 50 years, or we are going to change it and make sure that we can make more entrepreneurs, we can make less job seekers, so that there is a balance of opportunities available. And of course, we also teach people and children about handling their personal finances. One of the best example I can recollect from my childhood is, if your mother or father is giving you a piggy bank, and you get in India, if you get like 500 rupees in your piggy bank, you can go out and buy a football or a cricket bat and ball or whatever you want to buy. That's the money I've given you. That's a good way to teach your children about personal finances, because then they know that they've got $500 in their piggy bank, and then they have to use those 500 not dollars, I'm talking about 500 Indian rupees. $500 will be a lot. 500 Indian rupees in their piggy bank. So, do you think that this kind of a thing should be adopted in the childhood, and there is a need to change the education system globally?
Yeah, and I can only speak for the U.S. because that's the only country I follow consistently as far as like educating, folks on personal finance. But I'll make a hopefully safe assumption that most of the world is similar to the U.S. and that, like the U.S. I see people all the time go, we've got to teach, finance classes, personal finance classes in high school, and I think that's great, but I don't know about you, but I don't recall a ton of different things that I learned in high school. I'm sure that it built off of that knowledge level into college, but even then, I to your point, yes, it should start as early as when they're kiddos. I've got a 5-year-old who she understands a little bit about money. She understands that it buys things, right? So something as simple as just having the conversation that, hey, this costs money, is kind of building that base knowledge, that base education. But it starts there, but it shouldn't stop. It should continue on through, elementary education and in our, our secondary and high school education. It absolutely should continue. But the problem is that I think there's gaps in our system where there might be a 5 or 6 year gap that there's nothing that's taught. And we're learning things that most of the people that are learning them aren't applicable, right? Like I use very little. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, honestly, a lot of my math classes, even being in the personal financial space, a lot of my math classes are irrelevant. The fact that they teach you certain things how to do without a calculator, I'm like the reality is we all have a calculator, we all have a computer. So let's stop wasting so much time and like going that deep into teaching like to that level. You know what I mean? There's more important things that are more applicable that if people get their finances right, they're going to have a lot more opportunity and time on their hands to go back and learn calculus if they really want to. Right. So, and I think the other thing that I would love to see, and I don't know if you teach this so much as I'd love to see more people talk about it. And this is, something that I can do a better job of. And that's everything has risk, right? In personal finance, we talk about investing, and that's the risk and types of investments. But there is a humongous risk in going to a job that is your sole income. So when you lose that job, when you get fired, when you get let go, when you quit, you're done. If that's all your income, that sounds pretty risky, right? So even though I'm officially an entrepreneur and a lot of people say, well, you're a business owner, that's risky. It is to a degree, but let's say I have 50 clients and I lose one client. Let's say 50 clients nets me $100,000. And I lose, let's say, one client. So my income dropped from 198, barely noticeable, right? Versus a job that pays me 100,000 and I lose it. Well, I just went from 100 to 0. So I think there's a tremendous risk in not doing something, whether it's on the side, like you mentioned earlier, or just straight up becoming a business owner full time.
Absolutely. And I think this is also linked to this feeling of being grateful to what we have. A lot of the times, as you said, that people earn a lot, but then they also spend a lot. If you think about people around the world who don't have a shelter, a roof over their head, people who don't have money to eat 3 times a day. If you think of those people, then you reflect back on your spendings, I think then it's a feeling of being grateful to what you have and kind of spend less and save more, kind of a feeling. So do you think it's also linked to that feeling of, every day when you get up in the morning, feel grateful for what you have? And I think that also reflects on your bank accounts.
You're spot on. I think the feeling grateful, that's something I candidly could do a much better job of, because I think just like anybody, right? You compare yourself, even if you try not to. I try not to compare myself to others, but I end up comparing myself to others from time to time, and it's the neighborhood that you live in. It's the school that your kids go to. It's your family. There's a lot of variables that go into how rich you feel or don't feel at the time. And that's something, my family, I've got, there's a decent amount of healthcare workers. A lot of them are some form of doctor, nurses, business owners, very successful people. So if I look at myself in comparison to my family, I don't feel as wealthy or as rich if I compare, and that's why I try not to. But at the end of the day, there's another, maybe my neighbor, maybe they came from a family where none of them went, even past their secondary education, and maybe they just finished high school or finished a few years of college, and maybe they feel like they're top of the world. So it's very much relative to your own individual life, like you said. So I it's tough. It's so much easier to say, oh, well, just don't compare yourself to your neighbors. It's a very great theory, but again, this is reality, not theory. And the reality is, it's incredibly tough. And I think in the U.S. specifically, it is very, very challenging. We're one of the wealthiest nations in the world. But if you talk to, a third of the people that live here, they would probably tell you that they feel incredibly poor. And whether good or bad, that's probably for a broader discussion, but it's very relative to where you live. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's that's a topic for another day, Michael. I feel that there is a big discussion across the countries. The country that I come from, India, Australia, US, everywhere you'll see that. If you know that one of the richest Indians is the richest man in Asia, Mukesh Ambani, who runs the Reliance Group. He's got a lot of wealth. But if you talk about going to the rural areas of India, you'll find the poorest of the poorest people. And, the kind of miserable conditions that they live in, you can't even imagine. Some of them might not have any shelter. Some of them might not be able to feed their children, who are malnourished, who don't have any bone development happening from their childhood. And that's why they have different kind of diseases due to malnourishment, due to having those diseases, because they're living in unhygienic conditions. They don't have any choice because they're born in a poor family. They're forced to live in that condition. I think there is a big difference between haves and have-nots. We always keep on talking about that. Even in the United States, the most of the wealth is held by 3% of the people, top 3% of the people, who are the CEOs of the companies, and the rest 97% are kind of living a life of misery. A lot of the times, we talk about these things in every 4-year election debates that happen in the United States. But that's a discussion for another day for sure, unless you have some comments on that. But I want to know more from you on how COVID-19 has kind of accelerated this notion of people not becoming and realizing that we actually need to be financially independent. Because I see that before and after there has been a big change. Now, some of the people who were not even thinking about it, but now they're giving it a thought and saying that what if this situation comes again in the next 10 years? And what if our job just goes away because of certain reasons? I think we should definitely have something on the side.
I think hopefully it was a wake up call for a lot of people. If you look back, from 2020 to now, 2020, it was, a lot of the service industry folks, the hospitality, the hotels, the bar, restaurants, those folks, either they lost their job or they had to stop working for a pretty long extended period of time. And then you fast forward to today, and those businesses are up and running, kind of like normal. But then you look at the tech industry, which kind of saw a little bit of a boom right after kind of the initial wave of COVID, with kind of the free money that got thrown around. And now all those tech employees who, I think a lot of us think that, oh, they're untouchable. They're making a ton of money and they're living great lives. And they've all of a sudden they've done what I said earlier, where they've had the risky part of, they made, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, and they're done. They're cut. They're fired. And it's like, nobody's safe from, getting let go from a company. And at the end of the day, the only way to protect yourself is to have other income streams coming in, because again, it's very risky to have one sole income. And because if you lose it, it's like, well, I hope you have a lot of savings, because otherwise, how are you going to afford to live? And are you going to have to sell your home? Are you going to have to move somewhere different, moving back in with your parents? I think there's a lot of folks, particularly like my age and a little bit younger, that have moved back in there with their parents in the last couple of years, at least for a certain subset of time. And that's something I try to tell myself, is I want to be able to be in a position of power. And one of the COVID, I think it accelerated my thoughts around financial freedom. What does financial freedom mean to me? It means freedom, choice, and power, and not in any particular order, but the freedom to do whatever I want when I want, the choice to do something, again, because of me choosing it, and the power to be able to make that choice and have that freedom. Money is not money. Money is a tool. It's a tool that allows you the opportunity to have the flexibility and kind of the choosability of whatever you're looking for. I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too in a past life, where money was the end goal, and the end goal for me is it's no longer money. It's what does money provide, which is that freedom, that flexibility, that choice, and that power.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I think this was a really engaging discussion in terms of attaining financial freedom. And I'm sure this episode is going to be extremely valuable for any kinds of people listening to it, because everyone wants to have another stream of income flowing in. And at least if this episode can be a thought-provoking episode in the minds of people, that they start thinking of another stream after this, I think that will be a big achievement for us from here onwards. And of course, we hope to see you again on this series of episodes, or maybe discussing about some other topic. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This is an Ultimate Global Podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.